He said it so casually. The words drifted down the hallway from the kitchen, light and unburdened, and found me in the den where I was folding a pile of laundry that smelled of their fabric softener, not mine. I was babysitting my own grandson, a boy of 6 who was asleep upstairs. Because my son and his wife had an important dinner, it turned out the dinner was a celebration. "Just don't invite Mom," David said. "My David. My son." His voice was the same one that used to call for me in the night after a bad dream. Now it was a low murmur, conspiratorial. "It'll be too late for her, and honestly, it's more of a work thing. She won't know anyone." I heard the clink of ice in a glass. Then Susan, his wife, laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. That would have been easier to bear. It was a light, airy sound. A sound of dismissal. "You're right," she said. "We don't want her to feel obligated. And you know how she gets. She'll want to help or bring one of her pies. Just complicates things. This is supposed to be simple, complicates things." I folded a small t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, smoothing the wrinkles with the palm of my hand. My hands did not tremble. Not yet. I placed it on the neat pile. My pies were a complication. My presence was an obligation. My help was a burden. I heard David make a sound of agreement. "Exactly. Simple. Just us, the team from work, a few friends. We'll tell her about it later. They would tell me about it later." I was an afterthought. A bulletin to be delivered at their convenience. For a moment the air in the room seemed to thin out, and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in their foyer grew loud. Each tick a small hammer against a fragile surface. I looked at the pile of their clean clothes. I looked at the family photos on the mantelpiece. Me, David, and his late father at the Grand Canyon. Me holding a baby David, his face puffy with tears. Me smiling at David and Susan's wedding, a bit of lace from my dress catching on the pew. I was a ghost in all of them. A smiling, helpful, bjevakking ghost. A convenient fixture from a past they were busily moving on from. I finished the laundry. I stacked it in the basket. When they came home smelling of wine and expensive perfume, I was sitting in the armchair, reading a book under a dim light. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," David said, kissing the top of my head. The gesture felt hollow, a routine. "Was he good?" Susan asked, already shrugging off her coat. "A perfect angel," I said. My voice sounded normal. Steady. I was surprised by its steadiness. They paid me in thank yous and promises to have me over for a proper dinner soon. I nodded. I put on my coat, a heavy wool thing my husband, Robert, had bought me 20 years ago. It still smelled faintly of him, of tobacco and peppermint. I walked out to my car, the cold night air a welcome shock. I did not cry on the drive home. The tears were somewhere deep inside me, frozen. Instead, I just felt a profound and terrible quiet. It was the quiet of a room after the clock has stopped ticking. The quiet of a house after everyone has left for the funeral. The string that had tied me to them, the one I had patiently held, reknotted, and cared for all these years, had not snapped. It had been neatly and deliberately cut. And they hadn't even noticed. Back in my own house, the silence was different. It was my silence. It belonged to me. The old clock on my mantelpiece ticked a slower, more comforting rhythm. I walked through the rooms, touching the things that were mine. The worn velvet of my favorite armchair. The heavy, handmade quilt on my bed, pieced together by my grandmother. The faint scent of cinnamon and dust that was the unique perfume of my home. I went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. The whistle of the steam was a sharp, clean sound. I made a cup of black tea, strong and bitter. I didn't add any sugar or milk. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one where I had helped David with his homework, where I had cried after Robert's passing, where I had planned 1,000 Sunday dinners. I looked at the calendar on the wall. A big red circle was drawn around a date 2 weeks from now. Underneath it, I had written, David and Susan house down payment, $150,000. A significant portion of the money Robert and I had saved over 40 years. Money I had promised them to help them buy a bigger house. A house with a yard for my grandson. A house in a better school district. "It's an investment in the family, Mom," David had said. An investment in your grandson's future. I took a sip of the hot, bitter tea. The heat spread through my chest. An investment. They saw me as a bank. A resource. A provider of services, babysitting, laundry, pies, and, when needed, large sums of money. But not a person. Not someone to be invited to a celebration. Not someone whose presence was desired, only her function. That was the moment of clarity. It wasn't anger that washed over me. It was something colder, clearer. It was alignment, like a bone setting back into place. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was no longer a confusing, sprawling pain. It had a shape now. Purpose. I stood up, leaving the tea unfinished. I went to my writing desk, a small mahogany piece that had been my mother's. I took out a fresh sheet of paper, the good linen kind I saved for important letters. I took out my fountain pen, the one with the black ink. The pen felt cool and solid in my hand. I made a list. It was a short list. 1. Call Mr. Collins. 2. Go to the bank. 3. Change the will. I looked at the 3 items, the ink stark against the cream-colored paper. It was a plan. It was a boundary. It was the quietest, most powerful scream I had ever uttered. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. Then I went into my bedroom, unwrapped my hair, and went to sleep. For the first time in a very long time, I did not dream of my son. I dreamed of a wide-open field, and I was walking through it, alone and unburdened. The sun was on my face. The next morning I woke up before the sun. The house was still and dark. The feeling of resolve had not faded with the night. It had settled into my bones. I made coffee, chicory coffee, the way my mother used to. The smell filled the kitchen, a rich, earthy scent that was all mine. At precisely 9 o'clock, when I knew his office would be open, I dialed the number for Mr. Collins. He had been our family lawyer for 30 years. He handled Robert's will. He was a kind, quiet man with eyes that had seen a great deal of human folly and sorrow. "Martha," he said, his voice warm. "How are you doing?" "I am well, thank you, Jonathan," I replied, my voice even. "I need to schedule an appointment. I'd like to make some adjustments to my estate planning." There was a brief pause. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything is becoming all right," I said. "When is your earliest availability?" He had an opening the next day. I took it. I thanked him and hung up. One item on the list was in motion. Next, the bank. I didn't call. This was something I needed to do in person. I dressed carefully. A simple dark dress, my good coat, the string of pearls Robert had given me for our 25th anniversary. They felt cool against my skin. Armor. I drove my old, reliable car to the downtown branch of the bank. The building was imposing, all marble and polished brass. I had been coming here for decades. I knew the tellers by name. But today I asked to see the branch manager, a woman named Miss Albright. She met me in her glass-walled office. She was professional, efficient. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. How can I help you?" I sat down, my back straight. I placed my purse in my lap. "I have a joint savings account," I began. "It's with my son, David Henderson. I opened it to hold the funds for a down payment on a house for him," she nodded, pulling up the information on her computer. "Yes, I see it here. A substantial amount. A very generous gift." "My intentions have changed," I said. The words were simple, but they felt immense. "I would like to close that account. I want to transfer the entire balance into a new certificate of deposit. In my name only." Miss Albright's fingers paused over her keyboard. She looked at me, her expression carefully neutral, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps. She had probably seen this story before in 100 different variations. "As the primary account holder, you are fully entitled to do that," she said smoothly. "Because your son is listed as a joint owner, he would typically be notified of the account's closure. However, we can simply open the new CD first, transfer the funds, and then close the now empty joint account. The notification for closure on a zero balance account is simply a final statement." "That is what I would like to do," I said. "There were papers to sign." So many papers. I read each one carefully before I wrote my name. My signature, which had grown a little shaky in recent years, was firm and clear. The ink from the bank's pen was a bold, definitive blue. With each signature I felt a weight lifting. It was the weight of expectation. The weight of being the family's safety net. Its silent partner. Its ghost in the machine. When it was done, Miss Albright handed me a crisp new folder with the documents for my certificate of deposit. This will be locked in for a term of 1 year. Earning a very competitive interest rate, she said. 1 year. A year of my money being only my money. A year of safety. Thank you, Miss Albright. You have been very helpful. It's my pleasure, Mrs. Henderson. I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sun. The air felt different. Cleaner. I had taken the first real step. I had taken my name off a promise that was no longer honored. I had taken my future back into my own hands. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into the living room, to the shelf where the family albums were kept. I pulled one out, the heavy one with the worn blue cover. It was filled with pictures of David as a boy. There he was, with a gap-toothed grin, holding up a string of fish he'd caught with his father. There he was, asleep on my lap, a storybook fallen to the floor. There he was on his first day of school, his backpack almost as big as he was, looking back at me with a mixture of terror and excitement. I looked at the face of that little boy, and I felt a pang of grief so sharp it almost took my breath away. I was grieving him. I was grieving the son I thought I had, the one who would never have spoken of his mother as a complication. I closed the album. I did not put it back on the shelf. I carried it upstairs to the spare room and placed it in the back of the closet, inside an old cedar chest filled with my winter blankets. I closed the lid. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of preservation. I needed to protect the memory of that little boy from the man he had become. The rest of the day passed in a quiet hum of activity. I pruned the dead leaves from my geraniums. I polished the silver. I made myself a simple dinner of soup and cornbread. I did not turn on the television. I did not want the noise of the outside world. I wanted to sit in the quiet of my decision. The first call came around 7 o'clock. It was David. I looked at his name on the caller ID. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, a text message pinged. Mom called to check in. Call me back. I looked at the message. I held my finger over the screen. Then I pressed delete. Not replied. Deleted. The small silent action felt like a revolution. An hour later, another call. Another trip to voicemail. Another text. Hey, just wanted to talk about the house stuff. The realtor found a perfect place. Need to move on it soon. Call me. I deleted it. The house. Of course. The timeline was no longer about my well-being, but about his real estate ambitions. His concern was functional. His connection was transactional. The voicemails and texts were not "How are you?" but "Where is the thing I need from you that night?" I wrote in my journal. It was an old leather-bound book where I usually just jotted down notes about my garden or a recipe I wanted to try. Tonight, my son called for his inheritance. Not the one he will get when I am gone, but the one he believes he is entitled to while I am still here. My time, my help, my money. He has been withdrawing from this account his whole life. Today I closed it. The next day was my appointment with Mr. Collins. His office smelled of old books and lemon floor polish. He greeted me himself at the door and led me back to his cluttered, comfortable office. "Martha," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "It's good to see you, though I confess your call made me a bit concerned." "I am not in any trouble, Jonathan," I said, settling into the worn leather chair. "I am simply tidying up my affairs." He leaned back, his hands steepled under his chin. "What kind of tidying did you have in mind?" "I want to revoke David's power of attorney," I said. The words came out clean and sharp. "And I want to change the executor of my will." And the beneficiaries. Mr. Collins did not look surprised. He simply nodded slowly. He had the wisdom not to ask why in a way that demanded a story. He just asked, "Who would you like to designate in his place?" For the power of attorney and the executorship, I would like to name my niece Ally. You remember her? My sister's girl. She's a responsible woman. A paralegal. She understands these things. I remember Ally. A sharp young woman, he said, making a note on a legal pad. And the beneficiaries? This was the harder part. I want to remove David and his family entirely. For the first time, Mr. Collins's pen stopped moving. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. His gaze was gentle but searching. Martha, that is a significant change. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. My voice did not waver. My house, my savings, my investments, everything. I want to place it all into a trust. I want 50% of the trust to go to my granddaughter Maya upon my passing. The other 50% I want to donate to the women's shelter at our church, Maya. My heart ached a little when I thought of her. She was David and Susan's daughter, a bright, sensitive girl of 19 away at college. She called me every Sunday without fail. She never asked for anything. She just wanted to talk. She saw me. Unlike her parents, she actually saw me. Excluding her felt like a punishment she did not deserve. And your son? Mr. Collins asked softly. My son has already received his inheritance, I said. He has had a lifetime of my unconditional support. The account is now closed. Mr. Collins held my gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small, sad, respectful gesture. All right, Martha. I will draw up the new documents. A revocable living trust seems most appropriate. It will take a few days. I'll call you when they're ready for you to sign. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in years. The sky seemed bluer. The air crisper. I was dismantling the life I had built around my son, brick by brick. And in its place I was building a fortress for myself. The calls and texts from David continued. They were becoming more frequent, tinged with annoyance. Mom, seriously, you need to call me back. Susan is getting worried. I doubted that. Annoyed, certainly. Inconvenienced, absolutely. But worried for my well-being? No. If they were worried, they would have come over. They lived 15 minutes away. But they hadn't. They had called and texted. They had put in the minimal amount of effort required to get the response they wanted. I continued to delete them. Each deletion was a small act of power, a quiet refusal to be managed. Then on Sunday afternoon my phone rang, and it wasn't David. It was Maya, my granddaughter. I hesitated for only a second before answering. Grandma. Her voice was young and clear, but there was a thread of concern in it. Are you okay? I've been calling your landline. I had unplugged it. I hadn't realized how much its silence would soothe me. I'm fine, sweet girl, I said, and my voice was thick with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Love. Pure, simple love for this child. Dad said you weren't answering his calls, she said, her voice tentative. He's kind of freaking out. He said you were supposed to be sorting out the money for their new house. I was silent. I did not want to put her in the middle of this. Grandma, she said, her voice dropping lower. What did they do? And with those 4 words, the tears I had been holding back finally came. Not a storm of weeping, but a quiet, steady stream that rolled down my cheeks. She didn't ask what was wrong with me. She didn't accuse me of being dramatic. She asked, what did they do? She knew. At some level, she had always known how they treated me. Oh, honey, I whispered. It was nothing. And it was everything. Can I come see you? She asked. I can drive down this weekend. I would like that very much, I said. When I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of hope. Not all the strings were cut. The best one, the one woven from genuine affection and respect, was still intact. David must have spoken to Maya, because his next text had a different tone. It was the tone of a man who has been scolded. Mom, Maya said, you're upset. I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings. We were just trying to keep things simple for you. You know how you get tired. We can talk about the house whenever you're ready. I love you. I read the message 3 times. Sorry if we hurt your feelings. Not sorry for what we did. Trying to keep things simple for you. The same condescending excuse. You know how you get tired. An explanation for my feelings that place the cause within me, not within their actions. And then the "I love you," a currency he was trying to spend to get what he wanted. I deleted it. It was the easiest deletion of all. The next few days were quiet. I busied myself in my garden, preparing the beds for winter. I pulled weeds with a satisfying vengeance. I spoke to my neighbor Alice over the back fence. I baked a sweet potato pie just for myself. I ate a slice while it was still warm, standing at my kitchen counter. Tasted of freedom. Mr. Collins called on Thursday. The documents were ready. I went back to his office the next morning. I signed the new will. I signed the papers establishing the Maya Henderson Trust. I signed the document that made Ally my power of attorney. Each signature felt like a declaration of independence. "It's done," Mr. Collins said, stacking the papers neatly. "You are in complete control, Martha." I walked out of his office and I felt clean. That was the only word for it. All the murky obligations, the unspoken resentments, the heavy weight of being taken for granted. It had all been washed away. That evening they finally came. I saw their car pull into the driveway through my living room window. David and Susan. They hadn't called. They had just shown up. The escalation I knew was coming. I was not afraid. I was ready. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. They were standing on my porch, their faces a mixture of impatience and forced concern. "Mom," David said, his voice tight. "You finally opened the door. We've been so worried." "I have been fine, David," I said calmly. I did not invite them in. I stood in the doorway, my hand on the doorknob. "Fine. You haven't answered a single one of my 50 calls. We were about to call the police," he exclaimed, his voice rising. "And yet, you waited a week to drive 15 minutes to see for yourself," I stated. It was not an accusation. It was a fact. He flinched. Susan stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Her smile was brittle. "We've just been so busy, with the promotion and the house hunting. We're sorry. We thought you just needed some space." "I have been taking the space I need," I said. David's frustration finally boiled over. "Okay, look, Mom. I'm sorry. Maya said we upset you about the party. It wasn't a big deal. It was a boring work thing. We were trying to do you a favor." "A favor," I repeated. The word was flat, lifeless. "Yes. So you wouldn't have to stay out late. So you wouldn't be bored." I looked at him. My son. A grown man standing on my porch, explaining to me why my exclusion was an act of kindness. The chasm between us was immense. I wasn't sure it could ever be crossed. "I was in your den, David," I said, and my voice was very quiet, but it cut through all his blustering. "I was folding your laundry. The laundry you left for me to do while I watched your son so you could go to your important dinner. And I heard you. I heard you tell Susan not to invite me." His face went pale. "I heard her say I would complicate things," I continued, my gaze shifting to Susan, who looked down at her shoes. "I heard her say I would bring a pie. And then I heard you both laugh." Silence. The only sound was the hum of a car passing on the street. I did not misunderstand. I was not being overly sensitive. I heard the truth. You see me as a service provider. Complication. An obligation. You do not see me as a person you would want at your celebration. "Mom, that's not true," David stammered, but the words had no conviction. "It is the truest thing in the world," I said. "And it has set me free. The down payment you were expecting for your new house. I have made other arrangements for that money." His head snapped up. Now I had his full attention. The hurt feelings were one thing. The money was another. "What? What does that mean?" "Mom, you promised." "A promise is a two-way street, David. It is built on a foundation of love and respect. You and your wife have bulldozed that foundation. The bank account we shared has been closed. The funds have been moved," Susan gasped. "You can't do that." "I can," I said simply. "And I have. The money was a gift I was offering to my family. But I have come to realize that, in your eyes, I am not family. I am a function. And that function is now retired." David stared at me. his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning furious anger. This was not the mother he knew. The accommodating, self-sacrificing, ever-present mother was gone. In her place was a stranger. "This is unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. "You're punishing us." "No," I said, and this was the most important part. "I am protecting myself. There is a difference. This conversation is over," and I closed the door. I did not slam it. I closed it firmly and quietly. I turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the silent hallway. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I could hear their muffled, angry voices on the porch. Then the sound of their footsteps retreating. The slam of car doors. The squeal of tires as they pulled away. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt steady. The house was quiet again. My quiet. I had reclaimed it. The weekend came and with it Maya. She arrived with a small suitcase and a bag of groceries. "Figured we could cook together," she said, her smile tentative. We spent the weekend in a comfortable quiet. We made a big pot of gumbo the way my mother had taught me. We sat on the porch swing wrapped in old quilts and drank tea. She told me about her classes, about a boy she liked, about her dreams of becoming a teacher. She did not ask about her parents. She did not press me for details. She just was with me. Her presence was a balm. On Sunday afternoon before she left, she gave me a hug that felt like it could mend broken bones. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I'm on your side. Always." "I know, baby," I said, holding her tight. I know. After she left, the house felt quiet but not empty. It felt peaceful. I had my life back. It was smaller than it had been, in some ways. The circle had contracted. But it was also more solid. More real. A week later a letter arrived. It was addressed in David's handwriting, the weak penmanship of a disappointing son. I almost threw it away. But instead I put it on the hall table. It sat there for 3 days. Finally one morning I picked it up. I opened it with my silver letter opener. It was a single page. "Mom," it began. "I have been thinking about what you said. About what I said. I have no excuse. You were right. I heard myself in your words and I was ashamed. I took you for granted. I have been taking you for granted my entire life. Susan and I both have. We treated you like a utility, not like my mother. The money doesn't matter. What matters is that I broke something that I don't know how to fix. I am sorry. Not sorry if. Just sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know that I finally heard you. David." I read the letter twice. The words were there. The apology I had never thought I would receive. It was a start. A seed. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer of my writing desk, next to the list I had made that first night. The list that had changed everything. I did not call him. I did not write back. Not yet. Healing is a slow process. Trust, once shattered, does not simply reappear. It must be rebuilt piece by painstaking piece. The door was no longer bolted shut, but it was not wide open either. It was cracked just enough to let a little light in. The future would be on my terms. My time, my love, my presence, they were no longer freely available commodities. They were precious gifts to be given carefully, and only to those who understood their true worth. I went out to my porch. The gardenias were blooming, their sweet, heavy scent filling the air. I sat on my swing, a cup of tea in my hand. The ticking of the clock inside the house was a gentle, steady rhythm, the heartbeat of my quiet, reclaimed life. I was no longer waiting for a phone call, for an invitation, for a sign that I was wanted. I was simply here. In my house. In my life. Whole and complete. And it was enough. It was more than enough.